I had $1 left, no home, no hope, until he opened a forgotten journal from 1919 and decided to rewrite his future. I didn't expect to find anything in that box. Hell, I didn't even expect to be alive that day. But there I was, rummaging through a stack of books at a thrift store that smelled like old soup and mothballs, looking for something to keep me from thinking about how my life had unraveled like a cheap sweater. Divorce finalized. Apartment empty. Fired from a startup job I never really understood. It's funny how quiet the world gets when nobody needs you anymore. Anyway, the book. It was tucked between a Betty Crocker cookbook and a moldy copy of the Da Vinci Code. Thin, leather-bound, no title on the spine. I flipped it open and found pages full of looping cursive. Ink faded but still readable. Dated 1919. The first line said, "If you're reading this, you've got less than you want and more than you think. Start there." Goosebumps. No lie. I bought it for $1.75. Didn't even notice the girl behind the counter was trying to flirt with me. I was already gone, buried in those pages. The guy's name was Samuel Elbridge Parr. Never heard of him. But the more I read, the more I saw pieces of myself. Only difference? He'd been broke in the Dust Bowl era. I was broke in the algorithm age. Still felt the same. He started with nothing, just a quarter and a pocket watch. By the time he was 30, he'd owned half the town he grew up in. But he didn't get there by luck. He got there by grinding, trading odd jobs, flipping goods, making deals before he had the money to back them. But what got me most were the notes in the margins. Lessons, warnings, little arrows pointing to sentences with scribbles like, "This is where I almost ruined it all," or, "Greed is a great engine, but a terrible compass." I sat on the floor of my studio apartment and read for 6 hours straight. Didn't even notice I'd missed dinner. By the end of the week, I'd read it twice. By the end of the month, I'd made a choice. I was going to follow in his footsteps, not as some cute side project or therapy experiment, but for real. If he could build an empire in a time of rationing and war and zero safety nets, what was stopping me from doing it now? Sure, the game had changed, but human nature, that hadn't. I started mapping it out, step by step. His early moves, his mistakes, his mindset. I sold the few things I had left, a PlayStation, some old crypto I forgot I had, and a leather jacket I used to think made me look cool. Total bank? $417.11. Enough to last me a week or two, maybe, but I wasn't going to waste it. Samuel said the first thing he did was invest in information. So I bought books. Business, psychology, history. The kind of stuff I used to roll my eyes at in high school. I made a spreadsheet, built a tracker, slept less, read more. And one night, after 3 cups of instant coffee and a YouTube rabbit hole about local trade networks, I made my first move. I bought 10 used office chairs from a liquidation site for $15 each. Cleaned them, took better pictures, wrote honest, funny ads. Resold them for $40 to $60 a piece on Craigslist. It wasn't much, but it was profit, and it felt like magic. But then came the voice. The one in the back of your head that sounds like your worst teacher, your drunk uncle, your last boss. "This isn't gonna work. You're not cut out for this. It's just chairs, idiot." I almost listened. Then I flipped to a page in the journal I hadn't seen before. "When you're about to quit, double down." Samuel had underlined it 3 times. So I doubled down. Not on chairs. On people. You ever walk into a room and feel like you're trespassing on your own life? That's what it felt like that first morning I showed up at the flea market. I had a folding table, a plastic tub full of junk I'd scrounged up from estate sales and clearance bins, and a head full of secondhand wisdom from a man who'd been dead since Prohibition. Everyone else looked like they'd been doing this for years. Grizzled old-timers in denim jackets and booth signs painted with shaky hands and fading paint. I looked like a tourist, poser, a guy trying to hustle hope out of $5 paperbacks and retro lunch boxes. Still, I set up, smiled, waited, didn't sell a damn thing that first day. But I learned. I watched how the seasoned sellers worked a crowd, how they grouped items, how they told stories about what they were selling, even if half the story was BS. Never sell a thing, sell what it means. Samuel Parr, page 42, margin scribble. This got me my first $100, so I started doing that. Every object on my table got a story, purpose, a name. That rusted lantern? Vintage World War II blackout lamp. Survived 3 blackouts and 1 bad breakup. The old globe? Perfect for dreamers, schemers, or anyone who wants to remember the world's still out there. It worked. People laughed. They stayed longer. They bought. Not a lot, but enough to come back next weekend. Meanwhile, I was reading Samuel's journal like it was scripture. His rise wasn't linear. He had setbacks. A bad winter wiped out his inventory. A dishonest partner ran off with his savings. He almost quit more than once. It's not about how fast you build. It's how you behave when it falls apart. One of the most powerful lines he ever wrote. And man, I felt that. Because just when I started to see a flicker of success, my car died. Transmission. Totaled. I was standing in the parking lot of a used tire place with grease on my palms and tears of rage in my eyes. Felt like the universe had waited for me to feel hope just so it could punch me in the throat. I sat on the curb and read the same line again. Over and over. How you behave. I didn't scream. Didn't curse the sky. I walked. And I kept walking. Miles to the bus stop. Bus to the other side of town. Feet to the thrift store. Picked up more inventory. Carried it back in a duffel bag that cut into my shoulder like punishment. Sold enough the next day to buy a used bike. Progress. Then came Maya. She ran the booth next to mine, vintage clothes, mostly. Wild prints. Oversized denim. Scarves tied into halos. She had that no-nonsense vibe, like she'd slap you for calling her hun, but still hand you a water if you looked dehydrated. First few days she barely acknowledged me. Then she saw me repackaging a broken coffee pot into a hipster pour-over starter kit and muttered, "You're either brilliant or delusional." "Maybe both," I said. She smirked. Same. That was the start. Lunch breaks became shared sandwiches. We swapped stories. She told me how she dropped out of art school and started flipping thrifted fashion online. Not because it was my dream, she said, but because waiting tables in heels is a special kind of hell. We got close. Not flirty. Not yet. Just real. The kind of close that makes silence comfortable. One night, I was walking my bike home, backpack stuffed with unsold knickknacks, when I stopped by her booth. She was still packing up. Wind blowing, hair wild, eyes tired. She looked at me and asked, "Why are you really doing this?" Not the money. Not the surface answer. The real reason. I paused. Thought about the journal. Thought about Samuel. Thought about my own past, nights alone in a too-quiet apartment, the echo of a relationship that ended with a slammed door and 2 toothbrushes reduced to 1. "I want to build something that can't leave me," I said. She didn't laugh. She just nodded. Same. And in that moment, under a flickering streetlight and the hum of vending machine neon, I realized something. This wasn't just about following some dead guy's playbook. This was my story now. And I was finally writing it. You ever get that feeling like the ground under you is moving, but your feet haven't caught on yet? That's what it felt like the first time I cleared $1,000 in a week. Not from one big sale. Nah, this wasn't lottery luck. It was grind. Accumulated hustle. One refurbished Polaroid at a time. One crate of old computer mice sold to a guy who turned M into art installations. One weird, lucky flip of a broken NES I sold for triple to a retro gaming nut who almost cried when he saw it. I remember staring at my banking app on the library Wi-Fi, watching the number load then reload. $1,042.81. I whispered holy SH and the librarian shot me a look over her glasses. Didn't matter. I felt rich. Not because of the number, but because I made it happen. No boss. No clock-in. Just me and the ghosts of a diary 100 years old. Samuel's journal changed around that point. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was making moves. Buying land. Lending small sums to local farmers at fair interest. Investing in people others had written off. Build with those who build with you. I wrote that down and pinned it to the inside of my wallet. It reminded me of Maya. She was leveling up too. Started a pop-up shop downtown with a few other vintage sellers. Invited me to come help set up. Said she needed someone with working knees and a decent back. I showed up with folding tables and a busted Bluetooth speaker. We stayed late that night hanging fairy lights and arranging mannequins in ridiculous poses. At one point, I caught her watching me. "What?" I asked. She shrugged. "You're different than when I met you. Cleaner. More solid. Like you finally believe your own story." That hit me harder than it should have. By now, I'd upgraded to a rusted-out Ford Ranger I found on Facebook Marketplace. Had to start it with a screwdriver for a week until I replaced the ignition. But she ran and she gave me reach. I started driving out of town for auctions. Yard sales. Abandoned storage units when I could afford the gamble. Every item was a risk. A possibility. A lesson. And every night I'd read another page of Samuel's journal. His writing had changed too. More decisive. More measured. Then came a passage that stopped me cold. Wealth isn't the goal. Control is. Freedom is. Money's just the tool. But use a tool long enough and it starts using you. He was warning himself. And maybe me too. Because as I made more, I started needing more. Time. Sleep. Energy. Room to think. But the work kept calling. There was always another deal. Another flip. Another email to answer. Another what-if whispering in my ear. I started skipping meals. Skipping Maya. Skipping joy. One night she called me out. "You're becoming the thing you ran from," she said. We were in her apartment mid-tight takeout and I hadn't said a word in 20 minutes. Just scrolling listings. Tracking packages. Fidgeting like the world was about to end if I didn't refresh the app again. "I'm just trying to keep the momentum," I mumbled. She shook her head. "You're burning fuel you don't even have. And for what? A stack of boxes and a number in a bank. It's not about the money. Then what is it about?" I opened my mouth. Closed it. She leaned forward, eyes soft. "You said you wanted to build something that wouldn't leave you. But you're acting like it already has." Silence. That kind of feels like a mirror shoved in your face. She was right. Again. That night, I went home and opened the journal. Found a line I hadn't noticed before, scribbled sideways in the gutter of the page. "A man chasing only profit will eventually run out of people to celebrate with." Samuel had felt it too. This creeping hollow that grows when your mission becomes math. So I stopped for a bit. Not quit, just paused. Took a breath. Cleaned my place. Called my mom. Took Maya to an outdoor movie screening where we drank wine out of travel mugs and watched Jaws projected on a brick wall. We didn't talk about business. Or sales. Or profit margins. We talked about her paintings. About my dad, who I hadn't mentioned in months. About what it meant to have a second chance before your first one even finishes falling apart. And somewhere in that quiet, I found my spark again. Not the kind that burns hot. The kind that lights a way forward. If life were a graph, this would have been the spike before the drop. I didn't see it coming. No warning light. No gut feeling. Just boom, one day I was coasting and the next I was dodging wreckage. It started with a phone call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Eli Morgan?" the voice asked. Flat. Corporate. "Yeah," I said, instinctively tense. "This is Walter Kinley. I'm with Arcadia Logistics. We represent a client who believes you're infringing on a proprietary resell clause." That sentence made about as much sense as a crossword puzzle in Russian. Infringing on what? "Your online storefront uses descriptions and formatting that match elements from a prior employer's protected brand framework. We're requesting you cease and desist." I blinked, heart climbing up into my throat. "You're kidding, right?" Dead air. "We'll be emailing documents shortly." Click. No goodbye. No questions. Just a bomb. Backstory: 2 years ago, I did a short contract job copywriting for an e-commerce site run by a guy named Brody with too many teeth and not enough ethics. He never paid me on time, treated everyone like interns, and had a business model that screamed pyramid scheme with a Shopify login. Apparently, he trademarked parts of the brand language I'd written. Stuff I'd since adapted, accidentally or not, into my own listings. My gut clenched. I opened my laptop. Email waiting. Lawyer jargon. Digital threat levels. PDF attachments that looked like they'd been drafted in a villain's lair. The worst part? They weren't bluffing. The formatting was similar. The tone matched. Enough for them to cause hell if they wanted. And they wanted. I spent the next 72 hours spiraling. No sales. No sourcing. Just stress. Maya saw it in my face. Didn't push. Just brought tea and sat with me on the floor like I was a kid who broke his favorite toy and couldn't find the pieces. "You can fight it," she said. "I don't have the money." Then we pivot. Simple. Like breathing. But it felt like drowning. I'd built something finally. Piece by piece. And now some ghost from my past had come to knock it down. I wanted to scream. Or break something. Or disappear. But I didn't. Because of a line in Samuel's journal. "When the wolves come, don't waste time blaming the moon. Reinforce the fence." So I reinforced. Scrapped every listing. Rewrote every line. Changed branding, titles, formats. Lost momentum. Lost sleep. Lost 2 weeks of revenue. But I kept the roof over my head. And more importantly, I kept my name. When the smoke cleared, I went to see Maya. She was painting in her studio, barefoot, brushes tucked into her messy bun like weapons in a crown. I just stood there. She looked up, smiled slow. "You still breathing?" "Barely." "Good. That means you're alive." I walked over. Kissed her before I could think better of it. It wasn't a movie kiss. No music. No camera swoop. But it was ours. Afterward, she said, "I've been waiting on that." I laughed. Sorry for the delay. I had an existential crisis scheduled. That week, something in me shifted. I stopped trying to build a perfect business and started building a resilient one. One that could take a hit. I diversified, moved into print-on-demand merch. Digital zines. A subscription box built around found treasures from local vendors. And people bought it. Not because it was genius, but because it was honest. And more than that, because it was me. Samuel's journal was almost done. Only a dozen pages left. His empire had grown by that point. Rentals. Warehouses. A general store with his name on the window. But his entries got shorter. He was tired. In one of the last ones, he wrote, "I have more money than I ever dreamed and less peace than I ever had when I was broke." I reread that one 10 times. Then closed the book. And cried for the man who taught me how to live. Because I could feel it. He didn't finish happy. And I didn't want to follow him that far. I found it tucked behind the back cover, an envelope sealed with brittle wax, yellowed like old teeth. I don't know how I missed it. Maybe I wasn't supposed to find it until now. The front said, in spidery ink. To the next one. I sat at my table, heart-thudding, like I was about to crack open some sacred code. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded in quarters. The handwriting wasn't careful like the journal. It was rushed. Desperate. If you're reading this, you survived long enough to make something of yourself. Good. But listen close. There's something they don't tell you when you chase wealth. It changes the way the world sees you. But worse, it changes the way you see the world. Don't let the gold blind you to the reason you picked up the shovel in the first place. And if you're smart, you'll do better than I did. You'll leave more behind than just money. Build something they can't tear down. SCP. I sat there for a long time. Didn't move. Didn't breathe right. It felt like a punch wrapped in a prayer. And for the first time since this whole journey began, I knew exactly what I had to do next. Maya was sitting on the fire escape, sketching, when I told her. "I want to start a mentorship program," I said. She arched a brow. "For flippers. For kids like me. Like Samuel. Like you. People who got left behind before they even got a shot." She nodded slowly. "You serious?" "Dead serious." "Then let's build it. No hesitation. No questions. Just belief." Like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to something she'd already known. We started small. 2 kids from the neighborhood. 1 camera. A couple old laptops. Taught them how to photograph inventory. Write listings. Budget. Pitch. Fail gracefully. We called it the Margin Project. Because everything good happens in the margins. Just like Samuel's notes. It wasn't glamorous. We worked out of an old barber shop after hours. Spent weekends running mock sales booths. Held Saturday coffee meetups where we talked about life, risk, rent, taxes, and how to not let capitalism eat your entire soul. People showed up. Word spread. A local news site did a story. Then a podcast. Then a school asked us to speak. I stood in front of a dozen bored teenagers in a freezing gymnasium, heart-pounding, voice-cracking, and I told them the truth. I failed more times than I can count. Slept on couches. Sold my car. Got threatened with lawsuits over junk I didn't even want. But I kept going. Because I believed in the life I hadn't built yet. One kid raised his hand. "Why?" I smiled. Because someone else did first. And they left a map. That night, Maya framed Samuel's letter. Hung it in the office above the whiteboard where we planned workshops and scribbled half-baked slogans. She tapped the glass. "He left this behind for you." I shook my head. "No. He left it for whoever was next." She turned, soft smile on her lips. "So, who's after you?" That question still haunts me. In the good way. Because every day since I've tried to make the answer bigger. I should have known the moment I saw the envelope. It was heavy. Cream-colored. Too fancy for junk mail. The kind of envelope that smells like lawyers and champagne. Inside, an invitation. Gold-trimmed. From a man named Declan Wexler, CEO of some sleek VC firm I'd only ever seen quoted in Forbes. He wanted to meet. Said he'd been following my journey. Said the Margin Project had tapped into something real. Said he wanted to help it scale. My gut flipped. We just barely gotten funding for next quarter. Half the furniture in the office was still Craigslist specials. Our Wi-Fi cut out when someone microwaved popcorn. But this was real. Maybe too real. The meeting was held in a high-rise that looked like it was built out of mirrors and judgment. I wore my cleanest hoodie and hoped it made me look intentional. Declan was exactly what you'd expect. Silver hair, shark smile, Rolex that probably cost more than my truck. He greeted me with a handshake that lingered just long enough to let me know he was in charge. "I've been impressed," he said, gesturing to the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows like it was part of his resume. "You've created something authentic. People are hungry for that now." "Thanks," I said, palms sweating. Then he laid it out. He wanted to buy the Margin Project. Fold it into a network of social impact brands. Add some polish. Expand to 5 cities. Add a video series. A merch line. Monetize the story. "You'd stay on, of course," he said. "We just give you more resources." More, reach? He slid a contract across the glass table. 7 figures. My throat dried up. I didn't touch it. Looks like you've got a decision to make, he said, smiling like he already knew the answer. I walked out of that building feeling like I'd been spun in a blender. That night, I told Maya everything. She listened. Quiet. Stirring her tea. Finally, she asked, do you remember why you started this? Yeah. Then what are you actually selling? That one landed like a brick. Because the answer wasn't obvious. I pulled out Samuel's journal again. Just stared at the last page for a while. There was one final line scrawled across the bottom. I spent my whole life climbing. But I never stopped to ask if the mountain was mine. That settled it. I didn't want to climb someone else's summit. Especially not for a check I couldn't cash with my soul. Next morning, I returned the contract. Declan wasn't surprised. Just leaned back and said, passion's great. But legacy needs funding. I smiled. So does manipulation. He laughed. You'll come around. No, I said, standing. I'll build around. Rejection feels terrifying until you taste it and realize it doesn't kill you. After that meeting, I worked harder than ever. We launched a mobile unit. Started a weekly free market event for low-income teens to sell or swap their own goods. Secured community grants. Partnered with shelters. Brought on counselors to help kids with more than just side hustles. We weren't just flipping junk anymore. We were flipping lives. But the pressure didn't stop. 2 weeks later, our servers were hit by a DDoS attack. The site crashed. Donations stalled. Coincidence? Maybe. But my gut said otherwise. That night, Maya and I sat in the darkened office, the hum of a backup generator filling the silence. Still think it's worth it? She asked. I looked around at the walls covered in sketches, blueprints, thank you notes from kids who'd never had someone believe in them before. Yeah, I said. Especially now. It happened on a Tuesday. Gray skies, light drizzle, coffee gone cold on my desk. I was sorting through our monthly reports when Maya burst in, hair damp, breathless, holding her phone like it was a winning lottery ticket. Open your email, she said. I did. Subject line. Congratulations, National Resilience Fellowship recipient. I stared. Blinked. Reread. They'd selected me, us, for a year-long fellowship program. National spotlight. Media backing. $250,000 in unrestricted funds to expand the Margin Project. Maya was already dancing in place. I just sat there. Didn't cry. Didn't cheer. Just let it settle in like warm water on old bones. We did it. And not because we sold out. Not because we played nice. But because we stayed true. That night, we hosted a little celebration at the space. Plastic cups. Discount pizza. A string of lights barely hanging on. The kids showed up. The early ones. The new ones. Even the shy ones who barely spoke. They laughed. Took selfies. One of them, Cam, 14, eyes like fire, raised his soda and said, to Eli, for showing us we don't have to wait for someone to pick us. I nearly lost it. Later, after everyone left, I sat on the steps outside the building with Maya. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You still think about him? She asked. Samuel? Yeah. All the time. Think he'd be proud? I looked up at the sky. Didn't see stars? Just clouds. But that was okay. I think he'd say I finally made the mountain mine. I still have the journal. It's cracked. Faded. Pages smudged with coffee stains and old tears. I don't open it as much anymore. Not because I've moved on. But because I finally understand what it was. A blueprint. Not just for wealth. Or grit. Or even survival. But for becoming. Samuel didn't write that book to brag. He wrote it to keep from forgetting. To leave a rope for someone else to grab when the walls closed in. I got to be that someone. And now? Now I get to be the rope. Here's what I know now. Success doesn't mean much if it dies with you. Money's loud, but meaning whispers. And every broken thing, every couch surfing night, every busted car, every cracked voice during a pitch to nobody, every damn piece of it mattered. Because I didn't win by being smarter. I didn't win by being lucky. I won because I didn't stop showing up. So if you're holding this story now, if you've made it to the end, here's what I'll say. You're not done yet. You've got enough. Right now. Right here. Start where you are. And if the world tells you no, smile. And build it anyway.